Have you ever said something you desperately wish you could take back? Have you ever been so afraid, so overwhelmed by the weight of a moment that you completely abandoned the person who believed in you most? What if I told you that your worst moment, that moment when you failed the person you loved, when you fell apart under pressure, what if that wasn't the end of your story? What if it was actually the beginning? Today, we're exploring the story of a man who denied Jesus 3 times, who looked him in the eye and said, "I don't know him." Yet that same man would go on to change the entire world. This is Peter's journey. And maybe it's yours too. If you're watching this, there's a good chance you know what it feels like to fail when it matters most. Maybe you've made a choice you regret. Maybe you've abandoned something or someone you promised you wouldn't. Maybe you've stood at a crossroads and chosen the wrong path out of fear, out of survival instinct, out of the sheer human need to protect yourself. We don't talk about those moments much, do we? We talk about victories and breakthroughs, but the moments when we crumble, when we betray ourselves or the people we love, those we keep hidden. But here's what I want you to understand as we walk through this together. Your failure doesn't mean your calling is over. In fact, it might be exactly what prepares you for it. The message we're exploring today isn't about a perfect hero. It's about a deeply flawed, impulsive, terrified human being who loved Jesus with everything he had, right up until the moment when fear made him deny that love completely. And yet, that same man became the foundation upon which one of history's most powerful movements was built. His name was Simon Peter. And his story is a mirror for anyone who's ever wondered if they're too broken to be used by God. Let's go back to the night that changed everything. Picture this. You're in an upper room in Jerusalem. Jesus has just told all his disciples that one of them will betray him. The tension is suffocating. Then Jesus looks directly at Peter and says something that hits different. "Simon, Satan has asked to sift all of you as wheat, but I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail." Peter's chest swells. He straightens his back. He's always been the bold one, the first to jump, the one who speaks before thinking. So he says it with absolute conviction, "Lord, I'm ready to go with you to prison and to death." Can you feel it? That absolute certainty. That moment when you truly believe nothing could shake you. Peter wasn't arrogant. He was sincere. He loved Jesus. He would have walked into fire for him. But he also had no idea what was coming. Hours later, Jesus is arrested. And Peter's world collapses in real time. Soldiers everywhere, chaos. The man he followed, the man he believed was the Messiah, is dragged away in chains. And where is Peter? He's running. Running through the dark Jerusalem streets, his heart pounding, adrenaline and panic flooding his system. He can't think straight. All he can process is that everything is falling apart. Eventually, he finds himself outside a courtyard where Jesus is being questioned. He stays at the edges, trying to remain invisible. And then, a servant girl notices him. She looks at him in the flickering firelight and says, "You were with him. You're one of his disciples." In that moment, Peter's entire body goes rigid. His mouth is dry. This is it. This is the moment where he could stand up, claim his faith, defend Jesus. But instead, he feels something deeper than conviction. He feels fear, raw, primal, survival-level fear. And so he does something he'll never forget. He says, "I don't know what you're talking about." The first denial. A lie spoken in a whisper to a servant girl. But it doesn't end there. Again, someone recognizes him. Again, fear floods his system. Again, he denies Jesus. And then a third time. By the third denial, Peter isn't just lying, he's cursing, he's swearing oaths. He's so desperate to separate himself from Jesus that he's willing to destroy his own soul in the process. And then, he sees Jesus. Across the courtyard, their eyes meet. And in that single moment, Peter understands exactly what he's done. He's abandoned him. He's denied him. And the look in Jesus' eyes isn't anger. It's profound, heartbreaking sadness. That's when Peter breaks. Something shatters inside him. He runs and he weeps like a man whose entire identity has just been obliterated. Because it has. Here's what we need to understand about failure. It doesn't usually announce itself with dramatic music. It whispers. It creeps in through the gaps in our confidence. Peter thought he was invincible just hours before his collapse. He thought his faith was strong enough, his conviction was solid enough, his love was powerful enough to carry him through anything. And then pressure came, and suddenly he realized the truth about himself. He was human, fragile, capable of the very thing he said he'd never do. But notice something crucial here. Peter's failure wasn't a random moral lapse. It was the collision between his absolute belief in something and his absolute terror of losing it. The intensity of his denial matched the intensity of his love. He was so devastated by what he'd done precisely because he loved Jesus so completely. A man who didn't care wouldn't have wept like Peter did. A man without conviction wouldn't have experienced that kind of shattering. What if, and stay with me here, what if that moment of complete and utter brokenness was actually necessary? Not because failure is good, not because God wanted Peter to suffer, but because Peter had to discover something about himself that his confidence never would have taught him. He had to know what it felt like to fail so completely that he couldn't rely on his own strength anymore. He had to hit rock bottom so that he could finally, truly understand grace. See, Peter was always the bold one, the one with all the answers, the one who spoke first, and as long as he was strong, he was dangerous in his own way. Not morally, but spiritually. He was in the way of his own transformation. His confidence was his ceiling. His failure was his doorway. After the resurrection, after Jesus rose from the dead, he did something remarkable. He appeared to the disciples. And do you know who he appeared to first? Not Peter, not the one who had denied him. No, Jesus made a point to specially appear to Peter. And what happened in that encounter? The scripture tells us Jesus had a conversation with Peter that changed everything. It wasn't a rebuke. It wasn't punishment. It was restoration. Let me read this to you because it's important. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said. "You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." Again, Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Take care of my sheep." The third time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Do you catch the rhythm here? 3 affirmations. 3 chances for Peter to publicly declare his love. 3 opportunities to undo the 3 denials. It's as if Jesus is saying, "I know what you did. I know you abandoned me. I know you were terrified. I know you failed. And I'm choosing you anyway, not despite your failure, but with full knowledge of it." Your darkest moment doesn't disqualify you. It actually qualifies you. Think about that. Peter was broken now in a way he wasn't before. He'd learned humility through devastation. He'd experienced grace at the moment when he deserved condemnation. He understood human weakness, his own weakness, in a way that would make him infinitely more compassionate to other broken people. His failure had carved out a space inside him where mercy could live. Here's the turning point, and I want you to really feel this. Peter didn't become the rock of the church because he was strong. He became the rock of the church because he had been shattered and he'd been rebuilt by something stronger than himself. His authority didn't come from his confidence, it came from his brokenness. His power didn't come from never failing. It came from knowing what failure felt like and choosing to follow Jesus anyway. When Peter stood up on Pentecost and preached to thousands, when he performed miracles, when he led the early church through impossibly difficult circumstances, he wasn't the same man who had denied Jesus in a panic. He was a man who had been completely undone and completely remade. He was a man who knew what it felt like to fall and had experienced the reality of grace picking him back up. And here's what transforms this from a historical curiosity into something that applies directly to your life. Your greatest failure might not disqualify you from your greatest calling. It might actually be the thing that prepares you for it. The brokenness you're carrying right now, the failure you're ashamed of, the moment you wish you could erase. What if that's not the end of your story? What if it's the beginning of something deeper? Think about the areas where you've failed, the relationships you've damaged, the promises you've broken, the person you thought you were that you couldn't be when it mattered. What if that experience is actually the exact thing that qualifies you to help someone else through the same wilderness? What if your shame could become your sensitivity to others' pain? Peter's name meant rock, but he wasn't a rock because he was unmovable or unbreakable. He became the rock of the church precisely because he had been broken completely and then rebuilt by grace. His foundation wasn't perfection, it was transformation. It was the knowledge that failure doesn't have the final word. So if you're sitting with something right now, if you're carrying the weight of a mistake, if you feel disqualified by your own weakness, if you're convinced that your failure has closed every door, I want you to hear this. You're not finished. Your darkest moment is not your final chapter. And the calling that seems impossible for you to step into, it might be waiting for you on the other side of this wilderness. The question isn't whether you've failed. We all fail. The question is, what happens next? Do you let your failure define you? Or do you let grace remake you? Peter chose grace, and because he did, thousands of lives were changed. This week, I want you to sit with this question. What if the very thing I'm most ashamed of is actually what I need to step into my purpose? Let me know in the community, what's your struggle? What's the failure you're carrying? Because your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. You're not disqualified. You're being prepared.